Hi, everyone. It's Howard Gearhauser. On the line, you have my dad, Dr. G. In today's video, we want to dive into magnetism. So, as many of you know, we've talked a lot about electromagnetic fields and how they might have some adverse impacts on our health. So, today we want to talk about magnetism specifically and how that affects our health. So, Dad, can you just give us a little bit of a background on magnetism and why this is important?
Right. Magnetism, electromagnetic fields created in electricity have an electric field, and that electric field produces a magnetic field. So these two are always together. But one of the things that we often don't think about is how we've moved away from some of the natural magnetic forces. And the big one that affects us and affects all of life on the planet is the magnetic field of the Earth. So the Earth has its own magnetic field. And what's interesting is scientists tell us that the magnetic field of the Earth is actually decreasing. Right now, they measure the magnetic field of the Earth at about 0.5 Gauss. You know, Gauss is a unit, so they measure magnetism. And they believe that a few thousand years ago, the magnetic field of the Earth was 10 times stronger, or it was 5 Gauss. So humans at one time lived on the planet when we had 10 times stronger magnetic field, 5 Gauss. And it's thought that the magnetic field over the last 100 years has also continued to drop. So right now it's at 0.5 Gauss and possibly is continuing to drop. I don't know the scientific theorized reasons why it's dropping, but it is dropping and it has dropped. And so our ancestors had more of a magnetic field, and that's for two reasons. One is they weren't separated from it, and we'll go into a lot of those details today. They weren't separated from it like we are. And then on top of that, it's dropping and maybe not enough time for our cells and our physiology to evolve to this lower magnetic presence in our lives.
So, the magnetic field's decreasing. What does that mean in terms of how our bodies and cells react, or maybe even at the subcellular level? How is this a problem?
Okay, well, if you think of a magnet, so a magnet repels or attracts molecules that have a charge. So think of water, or water technically doesn't have a charge because all the protons and electrons are balanced, but because of the way the molecule sits in nature, you've probably seen this before, but there's the oxygen and then there's the two hydrogens of H2O. And they line up like this. So the oxygen's over here, the H's are over here. H's have a positive charge and the oxygen has a relative negative charge. So that molecule has what's called a dipole moment, or it has a negative side and a positive side. So that negative side and positive side will cause that molecule to line up in a magnetic field. I don't know if you've seen the demonstrations of where you place a magnet under a table and you put iron filings on the table and they'll line up in these, actually beautiful. They look like a fractal design of a plant or something like that. They'll line up in these beautiful aligned patterns because they have the iron in them that has a charge, a positive charge, that will line up as the magnet pushes those iron particles. So the same thing happens inside us, not only with water, but also with all the other charged molecules and atoms and electrons in our body will line up with the magnetic field. So if we decrease our magnet, then things don't line up like maybe we were designed to have them lined up. So you can see where, if everything started with a strong magnet and then it became 10 times weaker, we might have things not lining up as well. Now, as an example, there's a property in physics that was discovered on a theoretical basis by Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein discovered Brownian motion. What Brownian motion is when particles, and that can be molecules, are suspended in a liquid or a gas, they move. They have these random movements like this, and that's called Brownian motion. Well, because reactions don't happen as quickly if something's moving, they would react better if they were stable and able to react. Well, one of the things that the magnetism of the Earth does is it decreases this Brownian motion. Again, augmenting the chemical and biochemical reactions that life needs on a daily basis. We talk all the time about the 100,000 chemical reactions per second per cell, 37 trillion cells. Wow. That number, I wish I had that many pennies. I'd have more money that's on the planet Earth. So it's an important concept, and we could talk about, is anything in our modern environment making this situation worse?
Yeah, that's actually a great segue, because I was thinking we do touch on the non-native electromagnetic fields a lot, and those seem to be increasing at a pretty alarming rate. How did the non-native EMF have an impact on the Earth's magnetic field? Is that something that's part of the problem, in your opinion?
Well, the non-native electromagnetic fields, again, create more of this chaos in our system because it's an alien field. So it's going to cause either more or less movement. So in a way, we could think of this as kind of drowning out that already weaker 0.5 Gauss, drowning it out by having these more powerful electromagnetic fields all around us, permeating, all the stuff permeates right through our bodies, just like you get your cell phone reception through the wall of your house. Well, you'd also get your cell phone reception if you put your cell phone, in front of your wife. The cell tower's over here. Have your wife stand in between the cell tower and you'll still get reception. And, that beam goes right through her. Well, those beams go right through us. And so that creates a concern that this low Earth's magnetism might be even lower on a basis of, what it does to our physiology, cause molecules to line up. This could be even a greater problem. And that's why I recommend to my health coaching clients often is to try to increase their magnetism. Now, one thing that magnetism causes is the flow of electrons, so the flow of the negative charge. So one thing that helps us mitigate missing that good Earth's magnetic pull is to be grounded. So we talked on another video about how grounding lets free electrons from the surface of the Earth come up into our body and do kind of the same thing. But that's the problem. Modern humans have disconnected from the Earth pretty much with our rubber shoes, and then being indoors where houses are many times the floors are made of materials that are insulated, or the foundation's been insulated of your house, or they coat the foundation with some chemical that blocks the Earth's electric charge, the negative electrons from the surface of the Earth. So as a society, and as kind of the new diseases, we call them the modern diseases of modern civilization, things like Alzheimer's and heart attacks and cancer, a lot of those things were extremely rare, or in the case of Alzheimer's, didn't even exist, back in the 1800s. The first case of Alzheimer's disease was around the turn of the century, between the 1800s and the 1900s. So there was not even a single case of it. Same thing with heart attacks. Heart attacks, they did happen in the past, but they were extremely rare. Heart attacks heart attacks alone is the leading cause of death in Western cultures. In our culture here in the United States, that kills the most people of any other disease. It's something like with cardiovascular disease, getting close to 800,000 deaths per year. And here you say that disease didn't exist, back before we separated ourselves from the earth.
So, in terms of increasing this magnetism, because to me it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this magnetism is kind of the glue that's holding everything together. And if this glue's weakening and things start falling apart, then we're a lot more susceptible to these different health conditions. And that's why we're seeing such an uptick in these modern diseases. Is that sound pretty accurate?
I mean, that's a theory. That's a theory that, is not a commonly held theory, but it makes sense logically, and it makes sense looking at nature and how humans have changed nature. I like to think of the magnetic field of the earth as like a motherboard on your computer. So the motherboard, isn't the silicone chip or the wire, but the motherboard is the structure that holds everything in its compartment where it needs to be to function properly. So I think of the Earth's magnetic field as a motherboard that makes our computer hum.
All right, so let's talk about some practical steps to get this magnetism increased so that motherboard or glue is strong and can keep everything in the proper place, essentially. So what are some things we can do to increase our magnetism?
Well, one thing would be to sleep on the ground, but I don't think there are many people that will do that these days. So, I kind of don't put that out there as a recommendation to just sleep right on the ground through a conducting material. But I can tell you one of the things that I've done, and that is to sleep on a static unipolar magnet. So a static unipolar magnet, and the one that I use can be, depending on how many pads you place under you, can be anywhere from 5 Gauss, so it would stimulate the Earth thousands of years ago, all the way up to 20 Gauss. So 20 Gauss would be where, oh wow, I live in a bad EMF environment, or I have a bad disease, and I really want my motherboard to constrain my compartments as much as possible, so you can get these different strengths of the Gauss level of the magnetic artificially through having a magnet under your sleeping quarters. So what you do is you put this magnet, and these are very heavy. These things weigh 90 pounds for just one pad. And if you're like me, you might I have 6 of these pads on my bed. So we're talking about hundreds of pounds of magnet underneath me. Now, I went to great lengths to do this because you probably know my story that I almost checked out of this life on Earth a little less than 10 years ago because I was having heart problems and I was having chronic fatigue, and I was like pushing the envelope of trying to reverse the leading cause of death. Here I am. I almost died, almost didn't make it. You may hear my story sometime about my trip across the Grand Canyon, the rim to rim to rim run. Well, about a mile from my car, I collapsed with crushing chest pain and shortness of breath. Luckily, the cosmos intervened, God intervened, whatever you believe in, but I didn't die on the trail, even though no one came to my aid. There was no one on the trail. At 7 o'clock in the evening, 32 degrees out. But I made it back, survived. Here I am 8 years later, still alive. I think 8 years later, something like that. But I went to the extremes to get even this extreme magnet. These magnets are expensive. They're a hassle. I can't take this 300-pound magnet with me when I go to a hotel. Can you imagine? And plus, these things are flexible. They roll up, but they're so heavy that it's almost impossible to carry them. It's like trying to carry an octopus that weighs 100 pounds. It's nothing to grab. So it's a difficult thing, but it's something I did because I have pretty high EMF exposure. I had bad disease. I had chronic fatigue. And this is part of what helped me. Now, if you look at the science behind, say, this particular one that I'm using, have there been a lot of studies on this? It's not something someone can patent. And so, you're not going to get big studies because no one's going to pay for them. But there have been studies showing that it decreases pain in patients with fibromyalgia. There's another study showed that it increased the negative charge on our red blood cells. So our red blood cells, floating around our blood, they have a negative charge on the outside. And when they all have that negative charge, and there's a negative charge on the inside of our artery as well, that keeps things from sticking. So nothing sticks. So you don't have a heart attack when you have a good negative charge on your red blood cell. So it increases the negative charge seen in studies. And then there's been numerous animal studies and some human studies showing different anti-aging effects, increasing energy in various things. And there's been hundreds and hundreds of anecdotal things of everything you can imagine, from cancer to heart disease to neurodegeneration to diabetes. People say they're helped by this, but again, it's anecdotal. The studies, I wouldn't say, give us a strong direction. So it's something that just with me, it makes sense that our magnetism has declined a lot. Plus, we're bombarded by EMF. Two good reasons to do it. Then if you have a bunch of diseases and you put the magnet on your bed and you get better, you think, I'm another anecdotal account of this improving.
So do we have that link to where someone could go purchase that if they want?
Yes, the website is magneticosleep.com. And if you use the code BetterHealth, you'll get a 15% discount. And as I say, they're expensive, so they're not for everyone. If you're healthy, I wouldn't have that as your first preventative. I would ground, that's free. You'll ground more. But if your back's against the wall or you really have a high EMF exposure, this might be something that you could try. And some people, find that they don't think it helps. And so it's often you're able to sell these back into the marketplace if you go on eBay or somewhere else online. Plus, the Magnetico, they have, I believe it's 6 months. Don't mark me on that for sure, but I think it's 6 months. If you don't like it, they'll take it back. They'll give you 6 months to try it. I might be wrong about the time, but no, there's a period of time that you can just send it back. If your postman is very strong, you can send it back. Don't have any of those, lazy postmen. It's got to be somebody really, really strong. Then they can take 2 of those pads, 90 pounds in each arm, and carry that sucker out of your house. So they have a guarantee that if you think it doesn't help you. Now, I know some people, you're supposed to have one of the pads up. It tells you this side up. And so you start with that. But I've noticed some people, felt a little weird and they flipped their pad and they felt better. So I think we're all different. And so flipping the pad has helped some people, which, I'm not sure what the physics is of that, but this will increase the control of all the little things in our body that are vibrating. It will reduce that vibration so things happen more sequentially. It'll increase the negative charge like it does on the surface of the red blood cell. We also need the negative charge in our proteins. One of the things that helps our proteins fold properly, so our proteins are made by transcribing the DNA, putting it into RNA, and then with a little machine, make a protein with amino acids along the protein. So that protein then folds 4 times. And those folds are orchestrated by electrons. So you probably know Alzheimer's disease is proteins don't fold properly. And proteins not folding properly is a component of many diseases. So here we have a way to add the electrons, just like grounding does, add the electrons so our proteins fold properly. And that makes sense. The folding of proteins is not conjecture. The importance of electrons in the proteins is not conjecture. The fact that a magnetico sleep pad is going to help your proteins fold, that's conjecture.
So a good option is getting the Magnetico sleep magnet. Again, we'll have the link in the description along with the promo code so you can save a little bit of money if you decide that that's something you want to move forward with. So that's one option. What else can we do to increase our magnetism?
Well, the other thing is grounding. So ground, avoid non-native electromagnetic fields. There are places on the Earth that have a much stronger magnetic field. One of those is the crater in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where the asteroid hit 60 million years ago. It brushed off about 12 miles of the Earth's crust. And so if you're in that area, if you're within the crater, then the magnetism there is much, much stronger because that intervening crust of the Earth is gone. So you're right next to that magnetic core. So how does a magnetic field produced on the Earth? Well, it's the molten iron that's in the core of the Earth. The core of the Earth is at 5,700 degrees, okay? And it's constantly moving in whirlpools, and those whirlpools are caused by the Coriolis effect, which is the effect of the spinning of the Earth. So that molten metal in a whirlpool creates that magnetic field. And, it's a little scary that the magnetic field's going down. Again, I don't know if there are theories about why it's going down, but it is going down. But the molten iron and other molten rock is still spinning down there, miles down there, is still creating the magnetic field. It is weaker, and we can augment it. So going to the crater is one way to get closer to those whirlpools that are generating the magnetic fields. The other way is to be near a volcano. So a volcano has that molten stuff coming up through the crust. So if you're near a volcano, you're near that moving metal, that moving molten rock, and you'll have a stronger magnetic field. So I probably wouldn't live right over the top of a volcano. I would move off to the side about 50 feet or 60 feet. But, you move to Yellowstone Park, they expect that maybe not to blast for another 100 years or another 1,000 years. But living near Yellowstone Park would be an area in the United States that gives you this extra magnetic field. And of course, there's a lot of islands like the Hawaiian Islands that have volcanoes. There's volcanoes down in Central America. So there's a lot of places on Earth where there's active volcanoes that will give you a higher magnetic field. And the Earth's magnetic field will be much stronger.
So yeah, if you want to go visit the Yucatan Peninsula or find a volcano near you, that's another way that you can get a little bit more magnetism. Now, there's also a lot of new research going into how we can create a greater electromagnetic field from our body using breathing techniques and meditation techniques. And we won't go full on into that in this video. We'll do a separate one for that. But that's something where there's a lot of new research showing how we can increase our electromagnetic field using some of these guided meditations, which is pretty amazing too. Is there anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, and that's anything that we generate from within our body will be a natural electromagnetic field. What we want to be cautious of are the ones that man invents, that man thought, hey, I was the first one to think of sending wireless signals. Well, I'm getting a shit ton of wireless signals this very moment from that star. There's a star that's pretty close to the Earth. And when you look at it, it's pretty bright. And it's constantly sending a barrage of electromagnetic signals to us. But we think it's good because humans and all life on Earth, not all life on Earth, but most life on Earth is out exposed to that. And some of it hides, but that was through adaptations. It hides from the sun. There are certain animals and plants, not many plants that hide from the sun, but they have found some unicellular bacteria that live like miles and miles and miles under the ocean where there's no light. So where do they get their energy? They get it from that molten rock that's in the center of the Earth. And ultimately, that molten rock comes from the sun.
So yeah, get out in the sun more too. That's a recommendation that we pretty much talk about in every single episode. Get out in nature, get out in the sun, add in these other things to increase your magnetism. Go visit the Yucatan, see if you feel any different. Maybe do that every once in a while. I know that's something that my dad does on an annual basis. So those are some suggestions. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it's good to mention that the sun is critical. And, when you go to the Yucatan, it's a very low latitude. So you get a strong sun there too. So that can be a powerful place to reverse conditions, like using the magnet, is kind of expensive, kind of difficult way to really push the envelope. And going to the Yucatan, same thing. You're getting strong sun, strong magnetism. It can be a place of healing.
All right. Well, we'll end this episode here, but make sure to go check out all of our other episodes where we're really sharing our best advice on how to get healthy and how to do it naturally. And we will see you on the next episode. Thanks, Dad.
All right. We'll see you.